policy lunch, and we're waiting for that to end and see if he makes any remarks. Our other big story, shocking development in the case against actor Jussie Smollett. All charges against the Empire star have been dropped. I'm Dana Perino, and this is a Daily Briefing. Smollett appeared in a Chicago courtroom for an emergency hearing during which prosecutors dismissed the charges he faked an anti-black, anti-gay hate crime attack back in January. Meanwhile, Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the Chicago Police Department superintendent visibly angry, calling out prosecutors and Smollett. Matt Finn has the latest live from Chicago. This is a big, unexpected development today, Matt.
Absolutely, Dana. And the Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel says this is, quote, a whitewash of justice, and says that this grand jury that indicted Jussie Smollett could not be any clearer in its charges. And Superintendent Eddie Johnson, Chicago Police, says justice was not served and that this city is still owed an apology. And Dana, in talking to police sources and city sources in the hours after this alleged hoax, people were telling Fox News that they felt that this attack was a scam and that this city was being duped and being robbed of precious time, money, and anger here in this city as the entire case was dropped against Jussie Smollett. Smollett was indicted on 16 felony counts of lying to police. He was scheduled to be back in court in April, and then suddenly this morning there was an emergency hearing. Prosecutors filed a no pros motion, which basically means they want to no longer prosecute, and a judge honored that motion. The charges were dropped. Jussie Smollett's case will be expunged, and he has forfeited that $10,000, the initial bail that he paid to get out of jail. He forfeited that $10,000 back to the city. Now, Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson doubled down on his assertion that his investigators determined that Jussie Smollett paid the Osundaro brothers $3,500 to carry out this alleged hoax. I asked Jussie Smollett's attorneys after the hearing this morning how they felt about Superintendent Eddie Johnson's claims that the Osundaro brothers were paid, and here is what Smollett's attorney said.
The Ondero brothers said more than once that the $3,500 check they received was for exactly what Jussie said. It was for nutrition and training. They were his trainers.
The Osundaro brothers' attorneys told Fox News that Jussie Smollett gave that $3,500 check to them for a training and for a fitness program, but there was also a built-in favor, and that favor was the alleged hoax. Jussie Smollett, after this morning's emergency hearing, said that not a moment of this, quote, was in vain. It was a difficult time, the worst of his life, and then he thanked the state of Illinois. Dana.
All right, Matt Finn, thank you. For more on this, I'm joined by Preet Bharara. He's author of Doing Justice, A Prosecutor's Thoughts on Crime, Punishment, and the Rule of Law, and a former United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Preet, it's great to have you here. Of course, and I will say, I've read the book. I think it's fantastic. I do want to ask you about this breaking news. Can you take a listen to what Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the Superintendent of Police said just a moment ago?
Sure. You're in a position of influence and power. You'll get treated one way, other people will be treated another way. There is no accountability then in the system. It is wrong, full stop.
If you want to say you're innocent of a situation, then you take your day in court. I would never, if someone falsely accused me, I would never hide behind a brokered deal and secrecy, period.
Preet, obviously you're a U.S. attorney. You have long experience in the law. What do you make of this development?
It's sort of hard not to know what to make of it. I'm going to do that which people have not done over the last two twists and turns in this case, and reserve judgment. I really don't know. You know, when the news first broke that Jussie Smollett claimed to be a victim of a hate crime, lots and lots of people reacted swiftly based on what the evidence was at the time. That was tested, it seemed, and then we had the arrest of Jussie Smollett, who was no longer, it seemed, a victim of a crime, but now a perpetrator of a crime. And then people jumped on that as well. I made some commentary at the time because it looked like the prosecutors had a very solid case, and they seemed very passionate about the case, and the police chief came out and was very angry about the case and angry about the conduct. And then here we are a few weeks later with all the charges dropped. Now, that sometimes happens. You know, when you run an office, sometimes new evidence develops, or you realize that it was not in the interest of justice to bring the case. But it's a pretty remarkable thing that is fairly unprecedented to see so many twists and turns that you have whiplash as an observer. And so I don't know what the truth is. It looks like, from the clip we just saw, that the police department and the mayor's office have a disagreement with the prosecutor's office, and that's also unusual. Usually, cases are brought when both the prosecutors and the police officials think that it's proper to bring one, and they're usually dismissed when both in agreement with each other decide to dismiss the case, and so I guess the controversy will live on.
So, and just one last question on this before we're gonna get to the Mueller report in just a moment. But I did want to ask you if you could explain to people how that could possibly happen, where this seemingly this deal comes out of the blue, and the mayor and the superintendent are visibly very angry about the decision, but sometimes you just have to live with it.
It's really unusual. I mean, we brought cases. We considered the law enforcement agencies to be our partners. So if we brought a case with the NYPD, I was in New York obviously, or with the FBI or with the DEA, there was a consensus understanding that the case was worth bringing. And if there came a time, and it was not completely, it's not that it never, ever happened, but generally speaking, the prosecutors and the agents would agree, you know what, there's been a new development, there's been new evidence, or the case has fallen apart, or a witness has gone south, or evidence has been destroyed, or some other externality happened, and then you both agree. Now, sometimes you disagree, but this is a pretty extraordinary disagreement, and there have been so many twists and turns in the case. I think it's worth sort of taking a step back and
see
being
if we get
patient
more.
And try to
see if we get more information.
So.
Okay, Preet, stay right there. We have a Fox News alert. President Trump is on Capitol Hill. He's meeting with Republican senators, but the president taking some time to speak to the media on the Hill, saying the Mueller report was great. Mike Emanuel is on Capitol Hill. Mike, what are we hearing from President Trump there during his visit? It's not all about the Mueller report.
You're absolutely right, Dana. Good afternoon to you. President Trump sounding very upbeat, saying the Mueller report was great, could not have been better. The president then fired this shot at his political opponents.
I don't think they're talking about impeachment. We have the greatest economy we've ever had. Our country's in incredible shape. They and others created a fraud in our country with this ridiculous witch hunt, where it was proven very strongly, no collusion, no obstruction, no nothing. We are doing so well. We've never probably had a time of prosperity like this.
The president appeared to be in very good spirits heading into that luncheon with Senate Republicans now that the cloud of the special counsel probe has lifted, Dana.
So what's the fallout then from lawmakers on both sides following the release of this report? Well, at least the summary of it.
Right. It's clear a number of Republicans here on Capitol Hill believe there ought to be consequences and at the very least apologies from those who drove the Russian collusion narrative.
As we move forward in this new chapter, we should learn from this moment. For those who misled the American public, for those who said for more than 2 years that there is circumstantial evidence of collusion, owe America apology. They owe this country an apology.
Some have suggested House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff, who was very outspoken about the Russia investigation, should either resign from Congress or step down as chairman of that committee. So far, Schiff has tried to brush this off, saying he expected attacks from his Republican colleagues. Meanwhile, Democrats are pushing for release of the Mueller report by 1 week from today.
The ball is in the court of the Attorney General. 6 committee chairs have sent a letter requesting that the Mueller report be released to the public, as well as the underlying documentation, no later than Tuesday, April 2nd.
Expect that tension to continue, with Democrats arguing for the report to be released right away, while Republicans are likely to continue arguing they don't want to risk releasing sensitive information. Dana?
All right, thank you, Mike. Let's bring back Preet Bharara. He is, of course, author of Doing Justice, A Prosecutor's Thoughts on Crime Punishment and the Rule of Law, and he stuck around with us. I wanted to read to you something from a former colleague of yours, Andy McCarthy, who wrote in National Review about the Mueller report and about the decision not to go forward on obstruction by Mueller. It says, on obstruction, Mueller declined to apply the law to the facts. That was the only job he was hired to do. Whether he thinks the Justice Department's decision not to charge the president is an exoneration or something less is no more relevant than what you or I think about it. What a waste. And I wonder, Preet, do you think the special counsel law worked the way that it was supposed to in this case?
It's funny you mentioned Andy McCarthy. I know him well. He was my supervisor when I was a baby prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, and there's actually a very funny anecdote in my book about Andy McCarthy that may surprise some people. I think it largely worked. I think we'll know more when we see what the Mueller report actually says, if the public ever gets to see a pretty full version of it. What you wanted to have is someone with some remove from political forces and from an administration that he was appointed to investigate, and a campaign that he was appointed to investigate. No special counsel mechanism or independent counsel mechanism is going to be perfect and is going to satisfy everyone. But obviously you have circumstances sometimes when people high up in the government itself, there's smoke and there's a need to investigate, and you need to have somebody that has some arm's length distance from that, still supervised within the department. There was still Attorney General oversight, and in this case the acting Attorney General was Rod Rosenstein. So I think overall, Bob Mueller and his team, not everyone likes what he did, not everyone likes the conclusions, and depending on what side you were on, last week you liked him, this week you don't like him, which I think one of the problems you have in America, and one of the reasons I wrote the book, to have people make sure that they understand that the law is different from politics.
I want to quote to you from your book, from a piece that I pulled out. If we could pull that up on the screen, please, that would be great. It says, a decision to decline, to walk away, is not a blessing of the conduct, but in the system we have, minimalism tends to be the best practice. So you talked in the book about, you can go forward, and if you feel like you do not have the case, you have to walk away. But you also talk a little bit about what is the public owed to understand the reasons behind the decision not to prosecute.
Yeah, there's a tremendous tension, both in good faith, a tension between wanting to make sure that you're not saying derogatory things about someone who you don't charge in an ordinary case because they have a right to defend themselves, and if there's no trial, they sort of get talked about, and then they can't really do anything to defend themselves or exonerate themselves. And on the other hand, where there are issues of great public interest for the public to have faith that the decision to go forward or not go forward was made based on the law and the facts and not on politics. And both of those considerations are appropriate. The problem is when they come into conflict with each other, especially in cases of great consequence and great moment, which you don't ordinarily have. The garden variety cases that we did, robbery cases, homicide cases, organized crime cases, someone would decide we don't have enough evidence and you quietly close the case. There are different cases where you have people who are of public prominence, or you have this issue of conspiracy potentially with Russia or with obstruction by a president. Then I think the reasons for having more disclosure are significantly more pronounced, but it's a difficult thicket to undo.
Right, because you have people that you need to protect as well. All right, Preet Bharara, congratulations on the book, and thanks for being on.
Thank you.
And we have President Trump. He's leaving Capitol Hill now. He just had that lunch with Republicans. See if we can hear him. I don't know if...
Reading about him probably tomorrow. Thank you very much.
President Trump, and I think we have Shannon Bream is going to be up with us next. Shannon Bream, there you are. I don't know if you were able to catch what the president said, but you and I are going to talk in the commercial break because we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So prosecutors have dropped all charges against Empire star Jussie Smollett. Smollett was accused of orchestrating a fake attack on himself back in January, which he denied. He claims the two attackers yelled racist and homophobic slurs and pro-Trump slogans wearing MAGA hats. Shannon Bream, host of Fox News at Night, joins us live from Washington. Shannon, this was a big turn of events, and I wanted to just show you some sound from February when the police came out and how angry they were. They're sticking by their words. Watch this.
I'm left hanging my head and asking why. Why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations? How could someone look at the hatred and suffering associated with that symbol and see an opportunity to manipulate that symbol to further his own public profile?
All right, Shannon, you're America's favorite lawyer. You got to explain to us what's going on.
It's interesting because you remember, too, a few weeks ago, that female prosecutor who came out and painstakingly, minute by minute, walked everyone publicly through this case. And there were a lot of attorneys and people defending Jussie Smollett who said, you've just tainted the entire jury, because they talked about every camera angle they had of the two Nigerian-based brothers who were actually born in Chicago, but they'd been visiting Nigeria during this time. All of the cameras that were in Ubers, that were on hotels, I mean, they painstakingly walked the public through it. They had made their case. Now, as Rahm Emanuel, the mayor there, reminded people repeatedly today, there was a grand jury. This is separate and aside from the police who handed up all of these indictments. And he said repeatedly it was with just a sliver of what police had put together. It's clear the police are not going to back down. And the mayor's not either.
Wow. So we don't know where that's going, but we'll keep an eye on that as well. I did want to ask you one other legal question that happened overnight, kind of a big surprise. And this was about the Trump administration deciding to go forward and explain what they decided to do to try to eliminate Obamacare once and for all.
Yeah, because, you know, of course, Republicans for years campaigned on this. The president campaigned on this. There was a ruling by a Texas federal judge last year in which he said a number of states, Texas leading the coalition, to come to him and said, listen, now that the tax law that Republicans passed zeroes out that individual mandate tax or penalty that you would have to pay on your taxes, then the underpinnings of the law is no longer there. That's what the Supreme Court used to uphold this whole thing. So this federal judge in Texas said the whole thing has to go, but I'm going to keep the law in play while this proceeds on the merits. And, you know, the administration had said, we don't necessarily agree with that. Well, yesterday, they filed with the court saying, yep, we agree with that reasoning. It's now going on appeal to the Fifth Circuit and almost certainly probably going to be appealed to the Supreme Court.
Certainly the pre-existing conditions. You know, we heard a lot about that during the midterms. That's exactly the number one issue. People always say health care is on their mind. Listen to one of the Democratic leaders, House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, and what he said about this move.
Last night, this administration opened a new chapter when it moved to completely invalidate the Affordable Care Act. And that, to me, is the number one thing on people's minds. People are worried. For this administration to open that chapter, I think that we have got to reconnect our conversations with the American people.
So, Shannon, like one way, I guess, to repeal the law is to basically have the courts do it, but that leaves replacement very much in question.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people think. This is not only a legal story, it's a political story, because all of the 2020 contenders have come out, and a number of Democrats, as you played there on the Hill, to say, thank you. This is actually a gift for us going into a political year, a big year like 2020, because they're going to go out there and campaign and say this administration is totally irresponsible because there's nothing left if you are successful in getting rid of it.
Amazing. Shannon Bream, we're going to watch you Fox News at night, 11 p.m. Eastern. It's a great show, and we thank you for being here so early in your day for us. Thank you.
Great to see you. See you tonight.
Okay. President Trump on Capitol Hill, where he was asked about the Obama administration's involvement in the Mueller report. We're going to tell you what he said and then talk about that. And the Senate set to hold a vote on the Green New Deal, why even the sponsor of the legislation is not planning to vote yes. My next guest says it's time for the previous administration to answer some questions, writing, the Mueller report confirms that the Obama administration, without evidence, turned the surveillance powers of the federal government against the presidential campaign of the party out of power. It's time for Mr. Obama to say what he knew and did not know about the targeting of his party's opponents. I'm joined now by James Freeman, Wall Street Journal associate editor. You know, there's few things that unite sort of Silicon Valley liberals and Trump supporters, but the frustration with the Obama administration with not getting ahead of what was happening in regards to Russian interference is certainly one of them.
Yeah, and I think it's odd how a lot of the stories about the last 2 years of stories, how few of them mention President Obama. And I think partly it was a deception, whether intentional or not. A lot of people in the media have presented the FBI and the Justice Department as sort of independent agencies. And I think that served the narrative that Trump has no business managing them or firing James Comey. But it also, I think, has misled a lot of people into thinking that President Obama was not the executive in charge. He was.
Well, and some people have said, in his defender, saying, like, you know, he didn't want to weigh in too much because he didn't want it to look like he was interfering and trying to help Hillary Clinton win the election.
Yeah, I think we ought to know what he was doing. We now know there was no evidence for collusion. So,
you think that he should have to address this issue in public?
The idea that we take the surveillance powers of the federal government and turn them on the presidential campaign of the party out of power is
you write that there's no evidence, though, that those things were done with no evidence. But do we know that for sure, or have they just not shown us what evidence they based it on?
You mean, was there collusion or not?
No, in terms of the initial surveillance.
Right. So we know now from the Mueller report that there was no evidence for collusion. So if we've been waiting for something to say, oh, those FISA warrants happened with something beyond the dossier, with something better than a citation in Yahoo News.
That we should know that or not, right?
Well, now we know there was nothing there. So I think the question naturally ought to be directed, at the executive in charge, were you allowing, enabling, encouraging? There's a struck page text message that says the president wanted to know everything we're doing. We don't know what he was referring to or she was referring to, but we ought to know.
Well, since you have to write a column every day, you're going to write today on the Green New Deal. We just got new sound from Senator Barrasso from Wyoming about the Green New Deal and the vote happening today. Listen to this.
We are now at a point where every Democrat senator who is running for president has endorsed and co-sponsored the Green New Deal. So the question is, why are they going to duck that vote today? Well, the reason is because it's a big green bomb that will blow a hole in our strong, healthy, and growing economy.
And James, Senator McConnell wrote this on Twitter. It's remarkable to see a party coalesce around a proposal to forcibly remake the entire country on the whims of Brooklyn and San Francisco. But it's been even more stunning to see my Democrat colleagues angry and upset that the plan they support is about to get a vote. You're going to be right about this today. What do you think's happening?
Yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting to watch, because once you say this is a grave threat to the planet that must be addressed immediately, how do you vote present after that? I think this is, I mean, obviously this is the intention, to make people get on record and actually act on these things they claim to believe.
That's right. Well, we'll see what happens on that one. I think that obviously that'll fail today, but we have not heard the last of the Green New Deal, and we will read your column this afternoon. James Freeman, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
New help on the way for a flood-ravaged Native American reservation in South Dakota. Plus, do critics of President Trump now owe him an apology after the Mueller report failed to make a case for collusion?
When he was a candidate for the office, sought to collude with a foreign power that was trying to undermine our democracy.
Is it time for critics of President Trump to say they're sorry? Former CIA Director John Brennan has been a frequent critic of Trump, but now says he may have been wrong about Trump campaign and Russia. Listen.
Well, I don't know if I received bad information, but I think I suspected that there was more than there actually was. And I am relieved that it's been determined that there was not a criminal conspiracy with the Russian government over our election. I think that is good news for the country. I'm not all that surprised that the high bar of criminal conspiracy was not met. I am surprised at that second part of obstruction of justice in terms of how it came out.
In a New York Times op-ed, David Brooks writes, it's clear that people like Beto O'Rourke and John Brennan owe Donald Trump a public apology. If you call someone a traitor and it turns out you lacked the evidence for that charge, then the only decent thing to do is apologize. Let's bring in our political panel, Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union, and Marianne Marsh, former senior advisor to Secretary John Kerry. Great friends of this show and good to have you here. Marianne, let me ask you that question. David Brooks suggesting at least that Beto O'Rourke and John Brennan owe the president an apology. Would you agree?
I don't think there should be any claims of victory, defeat, or apologies until we see the full Mueller report and know exactly what's in it. And I think that's right for everybody involved, and especially the American people, which is why it's so troubling that Mitch McConnell yesterday stopped a vote from going to the Senate that passed the House 420 votes to nothing to allow just that thing. Lindsey Graham now doesn't want the report to be seen by the public. And Devin Nunes, who just a few weeks ago was on America's Newsroom just before me, wanting the whole report to come out. I agreed with him. Says on Fox and Friends yesterday he wants it to be burned. And Devin Nunes went running to the White House one night in the middle of the night because he saw something about it. So I think we should have all the answers to everything so then we can address all of this.
Matt, what do you think about that in terms of the report, people being able to read it? Because it feels like they think there's a cover-up here, that maybe there's not enough, right? So, like, you know, if the report can do the appropriate redaction of classified information and grand jury material, would you support getting it out there?
I guess, except, you know, this is the insanity of all of this, which is, why did we go through 2 years of this, Dana? Because there wasn't transparency with the initial decision by President Barack Obama and the Obama administration to use their government office and the power of our intelligence community to go after an opposition presidential campaign. We haven't seen any of those conversations. We haven't seen the FISA information. There is so much that we would all like to see. But no, what does Marianne and the Democrats harp on? They want to see every little part
of the Mueller report. Why? They want to see all that because they know it's a bar that Mr. Mueller and Mr. Barr cannot meet because of what you talked about, Dana, redactions, and the fact that there are prosecutions that are ongoing, and the fact that our national security is implicated. They know that there'll be redactions. As soon as there are redactions, they'll immediately say, well, they're not giving us everything. The thing is this, all of these Democrats ran around saying Mueller has to be given the ability to conduct his investigation. He got everything he wanted. He saw every document he wanted to see, and he came up with nothing. And it's time for us to move on.
Marianne, I'll let you respond to that.
Matt, if that's all true and it exonerates everybody, and especially Donald Trump, why wouldn't you want it all out there? Let the American people see it. Yes,
Marianne, I don't have a problem with it being out there.
It is the Republicans who are stopping it right now from being public.
Well,
and
in the meantime,
point to Mitch McConnell. I point to everybody I just said, every Republican.
So that debate about whether it comes out or when it comes out and in what form, that's going to continue. I do want to get your thoughts on this. Here's Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, talking about impeachment earlier.
Is impeachment off the table at this point?
The impeachment is not on the table until it is on the table, so it's not a question of that. This is not about that. This is about us doing our work. We're on our agenda. We are doing what we said we were going to do in the campaign, and that's what we're doing. So in addition to that, we are honoring our oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and we need to see the report so that we can do that.
Marianne, do you think that Speaker Pelosi will be able to, stem the tide of requests for impeachment hearings?
I do, because she very smartly several weeks ago defined what it would take if there were ever to be impeachment hearings of any kind. The information from the Mueller report would have to be compelling, overwhelming, and bipartisan. That was the bar she set, and Democrats at least know how to multitask. They'll be able to do things like health care and other topics you talked about earlier and campaign and win seats because of it, and at the same time hold Donald Trump and others accountable for the 2016 campaign.
Matt, a last word to you. I've heard that the president today, when he was with Senate Republicans, was fired up. He was talking about all the different issues that he really wants to work on, as if now that the Mueller report is done and he feels like it's behind him, that he can really get going on a domestic agenda.
Yeah, it's 100%.
I'm sorry, they just told me, I'm sorry, I have one more producer in my ear. We have some sound. Lindsey Graham, let's listen.
And I think all of us want to make sure that classified information sources and methods are protected. Beyond that, let's lay it out there.
Just you have already talked to Barr about this, or you are going to talk?
Going to talk.
Can you give us a sense of the president and the lunch today? You said he was really upbeat.
That healthcare was the first thing out of his mouth. Was that we got to be the party of healthcare. We got to get pre-existing conditions. We got to prove to everybody that if they get sick, they're not going to lose their coverage. And looking at kind of a block grant approach, modified block grant, challenge the Democrats to work with us. We're not going to give up on health care. It is an important issue, and we think our ideas are going to work better for the public than Obamacare. Music to my ears, because everybody talks about the politics of health care. What I'm talking about is outcomes. We need better outcomes for the American people. We need lower cost prescription drugs. He mentioned that. I think it's going to be a top priority for the president to try to reform the prescription drug business so that costs will be lower.
Thank you.
And there you had it, the senator from South Carolina, and he's also the Senate Judiciary Chairman, talking about a range of things. Matt, let me ask you about that, because we were just about to talk about the agenda going forward. He says that health care, drug prices, and pre-existing conditions is going to be the thing that Republicans will be able to count on going forward. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that's a really important area for us to focus on. We've lost 2 years talking about the issues that impact the American people. And I've talked to the president about this as well. He believes that Republicans have an opportunity to put forward their version of health care. It's going to have to be done in a bipartisan way, because you need 60 votes in the Senate, and Nancy Pelosi runs the House. But as long as Democrats talk about Mueller, it accrues to the president's benefit. He's got a real chance to press reset and to go back and engage millions of Americans who now realize that he's the duly elected president. And now let's talk about solving our problems. It's a real opportunity for the president.
Marianne, let me ask you about health care then. I think that the Democrats were certainly big winners in the midterm elections and on the House side when they were talking about health care. But can Democrats talk about health care beyond Medicare for all?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, healthcare was the reason Democrats won the House back, proving that Democrats can do more than one thing at the same time. And also, remember, the Senate has 20 plus seats up this time, including Mitch McConnell. So if they're going to get rid of pre-existing conditions, with what they did 2 years ago, that led to so many Republicans like Martha McSally saying, I've always supported pre-existing conditions, and then you run tape next to her saying she didn't, that's fine by Democrats. If you knock 30 million people off their health care going into the 2020 election, good for Democrats, bad for the country.
All right. It did sound low that, like Lindsey Graham said, the president said they are going to deal with pre-existing conditions. Of course, we'll wait to see what the plan is until it comes out. All right, Matt Schlapp and Marianne Marsh.
Obamacare is what hurt people with their health insurance, and that's why the American people hated it for years
you're
and
getting
years.
the gong.
And that's why they have health care.
All right, bye-bye. Fox News alert: a county in New York declares a state of emergency when it comes to the ongoing measles outbreak. Rockland County officials say as of tomorrow, anyone under 18 years old and unvaccinated against the measles will be barred from public places until this declaration expires in 30 days. Brian Yennis is live in Rockland County. This is a significant step, Brian.
It is a significant step, Dana. In fact, it is historic. Rockland County, New York has become the first county to ban people who are unvaccinated with the measles vaccination from all public places. All people who are under the age of 18, that's all children, are now banned from schools, churches, synagogues, no grocery stores, restaurants. They cannot be in these places unless they are vaccinated with the measles vaccine. This state of emergency will be in place for the next 30 days. Listen.
Last year, not just one, but 7 unvaccinated travelers diagnosed with measles entered our county between October 1st and October 17th, leading to 153 confirmed cases. And this is the longest outbreak in the U.S. due to measles since the disease was officially eradicated in 2000.
Dana, back to you.
All right, Brian Yennis, important story. Thank you. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Do your asthma symptoms ever hold you back?
In a shocking move, prosecutors dropping all charges against Empire actor Jussie Smollett today. Chicago police blasting the decision, saying they stand behind their case. But Smollett's attorney saying this case has been a rush to judgment.
You should allow investigation and allow the state to investigate a charge before you go to the press.
I'm joined now by Eric Guster. He's managing attorney of the Guster Law Firm. Eric, take a listen to Jussie Smollett, who gave very brief comments, but I'll have you listen to this and respond.
Okay. I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one. I would not be my mother's son if I was capable of one drop of what I've been accused of. This has been an incredibly difficult time, honestly one of the worst of my entire life. But I am a man of faith, and I'm a man that has knowledge of my history, and I would not bring my family, our lives, or the movement through a fire like this. I just wouldn't.
Okay, Eric, what is going on here?
This is the shock of the week. Well, this is only Tuesday with Jussie, with Trump, and Mueller.
Avenatti.
All this stuff is going on. Avenatti and Garagos. But this is shocking in that there was so much attention brought upon this case. I'm not necessarily shocked that the charges are dismissed based upon the charges that were brought. However, based upon the media attention and the resources that Chicago expended, the amount of media attention that Jussie sought, and that's something we talked about in previous segments where Jussie was looking for the media attention. He did the ABC interviews. He did the other interviews for other news stations wanting to get the attention to this matter, and then it was just dropped for $10,000 bond and some community service. So it